They mocked the homeless man for his rags. Next morning, he returned as their company's new CEO. The opulent boardroom of Thorne Enterprises hummed with an unusual tension, a stark contrast to its usual measured decorum. Sunlight, usually a symbol of clarity and progress, seemed to cast long, mocking shadows across the polished mahogany table, reflecting the unease that settled like a shroud over the assembled executives. At its head sat Theron Thorne, not in his usual impeccably tailored suit, the very fabric of power he had worn for decades, but in a simple, yet dignified, charcoal gray ensemble that somehow made him appear both more approachable and infinitely more formidable. His 72 years sat lightly upon him, a testament to a life of calculated risks and relentless work, his silver hair a regal crown, framing a face that had seen empires built and rivalries vanquished. His eyes, however, held a glint of something akin to a predator assessing its prey, a depth of knowing that sent shivers down the spines of those who dared to meet his gaze. A quiet confidence emanated from him, the kind that came from holding all the cards, from having engineered a situation whose outcome was already determined. Across from him, two figures squirmed uncomfortably, their faces a canvas of confusion and thinly veiled contempt. Cashin Valerius, the company's sharp-suited legal director, a man who prided himself on his unflappable composure, ran a manicured hand through his perfectly coiffed hair, a nervous tic betraying his outward facade. His eyes, usually cold and calculating, darted between Theron and the silent, imposing presence of Thorne's personal attorney, Mr. Harrison, who stood by the door like a silent sentinel of impending doom. Cashin's mind raced, searching for an explanation, a logical framework into which this bizarre scene could fit. He believed he knew Theron, understood the intricate dance of corporate power, but this was entirely off script. Beside Cashin, Lyra Sterling, the director of marketing and communications, clutched her designer handbag, her knuckles white against the expensive leather. Her meticulously applied makeup, usually a flawless mask of professional confidence, was unable to hide the pallor of her cheeks. Her usual confident smirk had been replaced by a bewildered frown, her gaze fixed on Theron as if he had just sprouted a second head, as if the very laws of reality had shifted without warning. Her perfectly constructed world, where image was everything and control absolute, felt suddenly fragile. "So, Mr. Thorne," Cashin began, his voice laced with an attempt at his usual dismissive superiority, a desperate bid to reassert control over a situation he perceived as absurd. "If this is some kind of performance art piece to highlight the plight of the homeless, I must say, it's rather dramatic. And frankly, a colossal waste of company time. We have pressing matters, you know. The quarterly reports, the new acquisitions," he trailed off, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes as he met Theron's unwavering stare. He still believed this was some bizarre, misguided charade, a senior moment from an aging CEO who was clearly losing his touch, a final, embarrassing theatrical flourish from a man whose era was surely drawing to a close. There was a smugness in his assessment, a deep-seated conviction that he, Cashin, the shrewd legal mind, was utterly immune to such foolishness. Lyra, ever the pragmatist with a flair for the dramatic herself, chimed in, her voice dripping with an exaggerated concern that bordered on outright condescension. Her words were carefully chosen, designed to appear sympathetic while subtly undermining Theron's authority. "Indeed, Theron. We were all quite worried when you disappeared. And then to return looking like, well, like you've been living on the streets. Perhaps a sabbatical? A long overdue break?" She offered a strained, pitying smile, clearly implying that the old man had finally cracked under the pressure, that his mental faculties were faltering, making him an easy target for dismissal. The irony of her words, given their earlier interactions with the very man sitting before them, was utterly lost on her. She truly believed that the disheveled, unkempt vagrant they had so casually dismissed, so cruelly mocked, could not possibly be the titan of industry now calmly observing them. The gap between her perception and the chilling reality was vast and growing. Theron allowed their words to hang in the air, thick with their arrogance and their profound lack of understanding. He observed their squirming discomfort, the frantic darting of their eyes, their transparent attempts to regain control of a narrative they no longer held. A slow, knowing smile, devoid of warmth but brimming with a quiet triumph, spread across his face. It was the smile of a chess master who had just delivered a checkmate, a silent acknowledgement of the meticulous trap he had laid. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze piercing, first locking onto Cashin, then Lyra, before sweeping across the other bewildered executives present, who dared not utter a sound, each of them wondering if they, too, were somehow implicated in this unfolding drama. The silence in the room became charged, almost suffocating. Performance art, Cashin? Theron's voice, when he finally spoke, was calm, resonant, and carried the weight of absolute authority. It was the voice of a man who held all the cards, a puppet master about to drop the strings, revealing the true nature of his players. No, not performance art. Consider it, rather, a thorough due diligence. A final, crucial test, if you will. He paused, letting the implication settle, letting the unease in the room grow palpable, a cold tendril of fear snaking around the hearts of his two most ambitious executives. Cashin and Lyra exchanged quick, nervous glances, their bravado beginning to crack under the sudden, chilling shift in Theron's demeanor. This wasn't the rambling old man they thought they knew. This was the Theron Thorne who had built an empire from nothing, a man renowned for his shrewdness, his uncanny ability to see through pretense, and his legendary ruthlessness when provoked. A dawning, sickening realization began to creep into their minds, a premonition of disaster. And the sabbatical, Lyra, Theron continued, his tone turning sharply ironic, a cutting edge beneath the smooth delivery, was precisely what I needed to see things clearly. To truly understand who sits at the heart of Thorne Enterprises. And who, perhaps, does not. He gestured subtly to Mr. Harrison, who stepped forward and placed a thick, ominous file on the polished mahogany table before Theron. The sound of the file hitting the wood echoed in the stunned silence, a final, resounding hammer blow. Theron tapped the file lightly with a finger, his eyes locking onto Cashin and Lyra, a glint of steel in their depths. The game, my dear executives, is over. And I assure you, neither of you will find the results to your liking. The air in the room crackled with an unspoken dread, a suffocating weight of impending judgment. Cashin's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching uncontrollably, and Lyra's face drained of all color, leaving her meticulously applied makeup a stark contrast to her ashen skin. They still didn't comprehend the full scope of their predicament, the depths of the trap they had so arrogantly walked into, but a cold, heavy premonition settled upon them. The homeless man they had scorned, the object of their derision, was now looking at them with the calm, predatory gaze of their most powerful judge. The revelation was imminent, and their comfortable worlds, built on ambition and indifference, were about to shatter into a million irreparable pieces. The silent dread was a symphony of their downfall. Theron Thorne had spent a lifetime building Thorne Enterprises into a global titan, a sprawling conglomerate that touched every facet of modern life, from cutting-edge technology to sustainable energy. His journey had begun not in some gilded incubator, but in the gritty streets of a forgotten industrial town, with little more than an insatiable curiosity, a relentless work ethic, and an unwavering belief in the power of innovation coupled with an unshakable integrity. He had built his empire on principles that now seemed almost archaic in the cutthroat corporate world: fairness, genuine hard work, and, perhaps most importantly, a deep-seated respect for every individual, regardless of their station or their perceived utility. It was a philosophy that had guided him through lean years and boom times alike, shaping the very DNA of his company, imbuing it with a soul that he believed was its true competitive advantage. Yet, as the decades wore on and his empire expanded, reaching into every corner of the globe, Theron began to notice a creeping corrosion. The corporate ladder, once ascended by grit and genuine merit, seemed increasingly populated by individuals driven solely by ambition, by the relentless pursuit of power and wealth, often at the expense of others, at the cost of the very human spirit he had sought to cultivate. He saw the subtle shifts in corporate culture: empathy replaced by efficiency, collaboration by cutthroat competition, and human value by cold, hard metrics on a spreadsheet. It was a disheartening evolution, a slow poisoning of the very ethos he had so painstakingly cultivated, a cancer silently spreading through the heart of his creation. The signs were everywhere, insidious whispers that grew louder with each passing quarter. He'd hear hushed whispers in the corridors about employees being managed out for minor infractions, not to improve performance, but to reduce costs, to streamline operations without regard for the human cost. He'd witness cold, impersonal dismissals, delivered with a chilling detachment, bereft of any human consideration or even a semblance of compassion. He'd read reports of predatory business practices that, while perfectly legal within the confines of the law, flew in the face of his personal moral compass, exploiting loopholes rather than upholding principles. His trusted lieutenants, once colleagues who shared his vision, seemed to transform, almost imperceptibly, into caricatures of corporate avarice, their eyes glazed over with the relentless pursuit of the next bonus, the next promotion, the next rung on the ladder, utterly blind to the damage they wrought. His most profound disillusionment stemmed from the increasingly evident chasm between the company's carefully curated public-facing persona, one of social responsibility, groundbreaking innovation, and ethical leadership, and the stark, often brutal, reality of its internal operations. The meticulously crafted press releases spoke glowingly of community engagement and employee welfare, of a company that valued its people above all else. Yet, behind closed doors, a different, colder narrative unfolded, one of cost-cutting, ruthless efficiency, and a callous disregard for the individual. He began to suspect that the very people he had entrusted with his legacy were, in fact, systematically dismantling its soul, piece by piece, blinded by their own self-interest, their ambition eclipsing their humanity. The question of succession weighed heavily on him, a constant, gnawing worry. He was 72, and while his mind remained as sharp as ever, a finely honed instrument of strategy and foresight, he knew his time at the helm was nearing its inevitable end. He needed a successor who possessed not just intellect and strategic acumen, the raw intelligence to navigate the complexities of a global market, but also the rare qualities of empathy, integrity, and genuine human compassion. He needed someone who would nurture the company's true wealth, its people, rather than merely exploit them for profit. He had watched Cashen Valerius, his legal director, rise through the ranks, admiring his sharp legal mind, his ability to dissect complex contracts, but growing increasingly wary of his ruthless pragmatism. Cashen was a shark in a tailored suit, capable of tearing apart any argument, or indeed, any person, who stood in his way. He saw no value beyond the bottom line, no consequence beyond legal loopholes, no person beyond their functional utility. Then there was Lyra Sterling, the charismatic director of marketing and communications. She was brilliant at crafting narratives, at shaping public perception, at turning abstract concepts into compelling campaigns. But Theron had come to realize that her skills were purely superficial, a gleaming veneer over a hollow core. She understood branding, but not humanity. Her focus was on optics, on how things appeared, not on how they were. He'd seen her dismiss legitimate employee grievances as bad PR risks rather than real problems, her solutions always centered on damage control rather than genuine redress, on managing perception rather than solving the underlying issue. These two, Cashen and Lyra, were the most prominent contenders for his mantle, or at least, for pivotal roles in the new leadership structure. And they, more than anyone, represented the very qualities he now feared most, the antithesis of everything he had built. A pivotal moment arrived during a board meeting where a proposal was made to cut employee benefits to boost quarterly profits. The arguments were presented with a chilling rationality, devoid of any emotional consideration. Cashen had argued passionately for it, citing market pressures, global competition, and the sacred imperative of shareholder value. Lyra, ever proactive in managing the message, had already drafted a press release to spin the cuts as a strategic reallocation of resources for future growth, a brilliant piece of linguistic gymnastics designed to mask the harsh reality. Theron had listened, his heart sinking with each calculated word, as no one on the executive team raised a genuine ethical objection. They were all complicit, either actively through their advocacy or through their chilling silence, their acquiescence to a system that prioritized profit over people. It was then that a radical idea began to take root in his mind, a desperate, audacious gamble. He needed to strip away the veneer of corporate hierarchy, to see these individuals not through the filtered lens of their professional titles, their expensive suits, or their carefully constructed personas, but through the raw, unfiltered gaze of vulnerability. He recalled an old adage his grandmother used to quote, her voice soft but firm, a wisdom gleaned from a life of quiet observation: character is revealed in the dark, not in the light. He needed to create a scenario where the darkness of genuine need would expose the true colors of those around him, where their true nature, unmasked by status or wealth, would be laid bare. And what greater darkness, what greater vulnerability, existed than homelessness? It stripped away all pretense, all social standing, all power, all the trappings of success. It was the ultimate test of humanity, a crucible forged in the fires of destitution. The plan was meticulously crafted, executed with the same precision and foresight he applied to billion-dollar mergers. He feigned illness, announcing a temporary retreat from public life for health reasons, a plausible excuse that would allow him to disappear without raising undue suspicion. He commissioned a small, discreet team of trusted professionals, a masterful makeup artist capable of rendering true degradation, a costume designer who could create authentic poverty, and a former security consultant to manage the logistics of his disappearance and reappearance. Together, they transformed him into Old Man Arthur, a wizened, unkempt vagrant, a figure so utterly unremarkable that he would blend seamlessly into the urban anonymity. His clothes were aged and frayed, stained and torn, his hair matted and greasy, his face artfully scarred and lined with the ravages of a hard life, his hands roughened and calloused, nails broken and dirty. He practiced his shuffle, his weary sigh, the vacant stare of someone long forgotten by society. He spent weeks observing those living on the streets, studying their resilience, their quiet dignity amidst overwhelming struggle, their constant battle against an indifferent world, absorbing every nuance, every subtle behavior. He liquidated a significant portion of his personal assets into untraceable offshore accounts, ensuring he would not be recognized by his financial footprint, severing all ties to his former identity. His only confidant was Mr. Harrison, his attorney of 40 years, a man whose loyalty was absolute, who was sworn to absolute secrecy, carrying the immense burden of this deception. His target was simple, yet strategically perfect: the main entrance of Thorne Enterprises, a place where his senior executives, including Cashin and Lyra, would pass daily, a symbol of the very power and wealth they coveted. He would spend weeks there, a silent observer, a living litmus test, waiting for the moments of truth to reveal themselves, for the masks to slip, for the true nature of his chosen heirs to emerge. He knew it would be uncomfortable, perhaps even humiliating, for a man who had commanded respect his entire life to become an object of scorn, but the future of his company, the legacy of his life's work, depended on it. He needed to know, unequivocally, who truly deserved to inherit the mantle of Thorne Enterprises. He needed to see if humanity still resided within its gilded walls, or if the relentless pursuit of profit had finally devoured its soul, leaving behind only a hollow shell. The transformation was chillingly effective. Theron Thorne, the formidable CEO, vanished, replaced by Old Man Arthur, a figure so utterly unremarkable, so easily dismissed, that he became invisible. The carefully applied prosthetics, the tattered, oversized coat that swallowed his frame, the perpetually downcast eyes that avoided contact, it all contributed to a portrait of destitution that was tragically authentic. He adopted a slow, shuffling gait, his shoulders hunched as if under the weight of an unseen burden, a lifetime of hardship etched into his every movement. A faint, unidentifiable odor, carefully concocted to mimic days without a proper wash, completed the illusion, a subtle deterrent to anyone who might consider getting too close. He chose a specific spot near the main entrance of the Thorne Enterprises skyscraper, a high-traffic area where he could observe the comings and goings of his executives, particularly Cashin and Lyra, without drawing undue attention to himself. He sat on a low wall, a worn cardboard sign propped beside him, offering nothing but silence. His first encounters with them were precisely as he anticipated, yet no less disheartening for their predictability. The cold reality of their indifference was a bitter pill. One crisp Tuesday morning, Cashin Valerius emerged from a sleek black town car, his expensive leather briefcase clutched firmly in his hand, a symbol of his status and authority. He was mid-conversation on his Bluetooth headset, discussing a complex legal maneuver, his voice sharp and self-assured, impervious to the outside world. Old Man Arthur, feigning a deep cough, shuffled slightly into his path, a deliberate, almost imperceptible obstruction. Cashin paused, his brow furrowed in annoyance, his conversation briefly interrupted. He didn't even look at the homeless man directly, but rather, his gaze swept dismissively over Arthur's worn shoes before settling on the pristine pavement beside him, as if the man himself was too unpleasant to acknowledge. "Move along, old-timer," Cashin muttered, his voice devoid of any genuine malice, simply a weary impatience, as if Arthur were an inconvenient obstacle, a stray piece of litter on his pristine path. "You're blocking the entrance. This isn't a public park." He made a shooing motion with his hand, as one might wave away a bothersome fly, before sidestepping Arthur and continuing his conversation, completely unbothered by the human being he had just deigned to acknowledge. The legal director was already halfway through the revolving doors before Arthur had fully cleared the path, leaving behind a faint waft of expensive cologne that contrasted sharply with Arthur's fabricated scent of destitution. The contrast was a visceral representation of the chasm between them. Days later, Lyra Sterling made her grand entrance, stepping out of an Uber, her bright red power suit a beacon of corporate ambition, designed to command attention. She was laughing into her phone, presumably at some witty office gossip, her voice tinkling and self-satisfied. As she approached the entrance, her eyes, ever vigilant for potential aesthetic disruptions, for anything that might mar the perfect facade of Thorne Enterprises, landed on Old Man Arthur. Her laughter died abruptly. A look of distaste, bordering on outright disgust, flickered across her perfectly sculpted features, her nose wrinkling almost imperceptibly. She stopped short, pulling her phone away from her ear, her composure momentarily shattered. "Oh, for heaven's sake," Lyra exclaimed, her voice carrying a theatrical exasperation, loud enough to be heard by anyone nearby. She turned to the security guard, a burly man named Frank who had worked for Thorne Enterprises for years and knew Theron Thorne intimately, but who now looked blankly at Arthur, unable to pierce the disguise. "Frank, really? This is becoming a nuisance. Do we not have a policy about vagrants loitering here? It's bad for our image. What will clients think?" She gestured dramatically at Arthur, as if he were an eyesore, a smudge on the gleaming facade of her carefully curated corporate world. "He needs to go. Now. Before someone important sees him." She then swept past Arthur, giving him a wide berth, her nose visibly wrinkling as if she could smell his fabricated destitution, as if poverty itself was an offensive odor. Frank, a good man just doing his job, approached Arthur apologetically, mumbling about company policy, but Arthur merely nodded, understanding the unspoken power dynamic at play, the invisible lines of authority that dictated his perceived worth. These were not isolated incidents. They were daily occurrences, a depressing, repetitive cycle of indifference and contempt. Cashin would often ignore Arthur entirely, striding past him as if he were part of the concrete landscape, an inanimate object devoid of sentience. On other occasions, he'd be more direct, his words laced with thinly veiled threats, enjoying the perceived terror he instilled. "Still here?" he'd sneer one morning, pausing briefly, a cruel glint in his eye. "You know, the police have nothing better to do than round up undesirables. I'm sure we could arrange a little chat for you." He'd flash a cruel smile, clearly enjoying the perceived power imbalance, the complete helplessness of the man before him. Theron, as Arthur, would merely meet his gaze with a vacant stare, feeling a cold dread settle in his stomach, a bitter confirmation of his worst fears. This was the man he had considered for the highest office? This hollow shell of ambition? Lyra, on the other hand, was more concerned with appearances, with the visual narrative. She once offered Arthur $5, not out of genuine charity, but with a condescending tone, her voice pitched to be overheard, instructing him to go get yourself a coffee somewhere else. "You're making the entrance look unwelcoming." Her generosity was transactional, a means to remove an unsightly element from her visual field, to maintain the illusion of corporate perfection. Another time, she publicly chided a junior employee named Emily who had offered Arthur a half-eaten sandwich, a small, kind gesture. "Don't encourage them, Emily," she had hissed, her voice sharp with disapproval, drawing a clear, harsh distinction between us and them. "You never know what they might carry. And besides, it sets a bad precedent. We're a luxury brand, not a charity kitchen." The words cut deep, not just for Emily, but for Theron, a stark revelation of Lyra's true priorities. From his vantage point, Theron, as Arthur, witnessed countless such interactions. He saw the cold indifference in the eyes of many, the hurried steps of others trying to avoid eye contact, the self-important glances of those who believed their status elevated them above the common man. Each dismissal, each sneer, each act of calculated avoidance chipped away at the last vestiges of his hope for his current leadership team. The company he had built, brick by painstaking brick, was becoming a monument to his worst fears, a place where profit was king, and humanity was an inconvenient externality, a disposable cost. But amidst the pervasive coldness, a different kind of interaction began to unfold, a quiet counterpoint to the symphony of disdain. Every afternoon, usually around 3 o'clock, a small, unassuming woman would emerge from the staff entrance, pushing a large, rattling cleaning cart. She was Alara Finch, a cleaner in her late 60s, her face etched with the lines of a life lived through hard work, her movements slow but deliberate, carrying the quiet dignity of someone who took pride in their unseen labor. Her uniform, though clean, was worn thin, and her shoes, sensible and comfortable, bore the scuff marks of countless hours spent on her feet, silently traversing the polished floors of Thorn Enterprises. Alara had a quiet dignity about her, a gentle aura that seemed to soften the harsh edges of the corporate environment, a beacon of unassuming grace. She rarely spoke, her work being her silent testament to her dedication, her presence a quiet hum in the background of the bustling skyscraper. Theron, as Arthur, had watched her from afar for days, observing her methodical movements, the small, almost imperceptible nods she gave to the security guards, the way she carefully avoided disturbing anyone, a silent observer of the human drama unfolding around her. One particularly chilly afternoon, as the wind whipped around the skyscraper, biting through Arthur's threadbare coat, he shivered, pulling the thin fabric tighter around him. He hadn't eaten properly all day, and the hunger gnawed at him, a physical manifestation of his manufactured despair. He saw Alara pushing her cart towards the staff exit, preparing for her break, her head bowed in quiet thought. As she passed, her eyes, kind and knowing, met his. There was no judgment in them, only a shared understanding of hardship, a silent recognition of a fellow traveler on life's difficult path. She paused, pretending to adjust something on her cart, and subtly, almost imperceptibly, slid a brown paper bag onto the low wall beside him, a gesture so swift and practiced it was almost invisible. Her movements were swift, efficient, as if she had done this before, a silent routine born of quiet compassion. She didn't make eye contact again, just offered a fleeting, almost imperceptible nod, a tiny gesture of solidarity, a silent blessing, before continuing on her way, her head slightly bowed, disappearing into the hum of the building. Arthur waited until she was out of sight, until he was sure no one was watching, then reached for the bag, his hands trembling slightly with anticipation. Inside, he found a neatly wrapped sandwich, ham and cheese, simple but substantial, and a small, insulated cup of still warm tea, the warmth a comforting contrast to the biting cold. A wave of profound emotion washed over him, a lump forming in his throat. It wasn't just the food, it was the sheer, unadulterated kindness of the gesture. There was no expectation of gratitude, no demand for recognition, no public display of charity. It was a private act of human connection, offered silently, respectfully, from one person to another. This was not charity offered from a position of power, but compassion extended from someone who clearly understood struggle, from one human being recognizing the inherent dignity in another. Over the next few weeks, this silent ritual continued. Alara, without fail, would leave a small offering for Arthur, sometimes a sandwich, sometimes a piece of fruit, once even a small, store-bought pastry, a rare treat. She never spoke, never lingered, never drew attention to her actions, her benevolence a quiet, consistent flame in the corporate chill. Her eyes, whenever they met his, conveyed a silent message of empathy, a shared humanity that transcended their perceived stations. Theron observed her closely, not just her kindness towards him, but her interactions with others within the building. He noticed how she would stop to help a junior employee pick up dropped papers, how she would offer a tired but genuine smile to the night security guard, how she always left the bathrooms impeccably clean, as if taking pride in her unseen work, a quiet testament to her unwavering dedication. She was a silent guardian of the company's physical space, and, it now seemed, of its dwindling soul. The contrast between Alara's quiet generosity and Cashin and Lyra's blatant disregard became starker with each passing day, a glaring indictment of their character. Cashin continued to threaten him, once even calling campus security directly, demanding Arthur be removed permanently for harassing employees, his voice laced with venom. Lyra, seeing this, had added her own complaints, citing a potential PR nightmare if the squatter was not dealt with swiftly and decisively. Theron, as Arthur, simply sat, absorbed it all, and solidified his resolve. He saw their true nature laid bare, self-serving, heartless, utterly devoid of the very qualities he sought in his successor. He had found the rot, and he had found the antidote. The time for the test was drawing to a close. The masks were about to fall, and the truth, harsh and unyielding, would finally be revealed. The atmosphere in the Thorne Enterprises headquarters on the day of the much-anticipated board meeting was thick with nervous anticipation. Rumors had been swirling for weeks about Theron Thorne's impending announcement regarding his successor, whispers fueled by leaks and speculation. The executive team, particularly Cashin Valerius and Lyra Sterling, had been preening, each convinced they were poised for a significant promotion, perhaps even the coveted CEO position, or at least a highly influential role in the new regime. They had meticulously prepared their presentations, rehearsed their confident speeches, and polished their most charming smiles, ready for their moment in the sun. The grand auditorium, usually reserved for major product launches and shareholder meetings, a cavernous space designed to impress and intimidate, was filled with the company's top executives, board members, and key investors. A large video screen displayed the Thorne Enterprises logo, gleaming and powerful, a silent testament to the empire built by the man they awaited. Cashin sat in the front row, his posture rigid with self-importance, occasionally whispering a dismissive comment to Lyra about a rival executive's nervous fidgeting, confident in his imminent triumph. Lyra, ever the public relations expert, offered a perfectly practiced serene smile to anyone who caught her eye, though her inner turmoil was a swirling maelstrom of ambition and anxious expectation, her carefully constructed facade barely containing the storm within. The clock ticked past the scheduled start time. 5 minutes. 10. A low murmur rippled through the audience, growing louder with each passing moment. Where was Theron Thorne? Had his illness finally claimed him? Just as Lyra was about to lean over to Cashin to suggest they might have to start without him, seizing the moment, the double doors at the back of the auditorium swung open with a dramatic flourish, echoing through the vast space. All heads turned, a collective intake of breath. A hushed gasp swept through the room, followed by a ripple of confusion, then outright bewilderment. Standing silhouetted against the bright hallway lights was Mr. Harrison, Theron's longtime attorney, his face uncharacteristically stern, his presence a harbinger of something significant. Beside him, however, was not the ailing Theron Thorne they had expected. Instead, a figure emerged, slow and deliberate, shuffling forward. It was Old Man Arthur. A ripple of confusion, then outright bewilderment, spread through the audience, a collective murmur of disbelief. Cashin's eyes narrowed in disbelief, his mind struggling to reconcile the image before him with the sanctity of the corporate event. Lyra's perfectly composed smile faltered, replaced by a look of bewildered horror, her perfectly sculpted features contorted in a mask of shock. What was he doing here? Had the security guards failed to remove him? Was this some incredibly tasteless joke, a bizarre stunt by a senile CEO? Old Man Arthur, still in his tattered coat and worn-out shoes, shuffled down the central aisle, his gaze sweeping over the faces of the stunned executives, a silent acknowledgement of their discomfort. As he reached the front, just below the stage, he stopped. Mr. Harrison stepped forward, and with a swift, decisive motion, helped Arthur remove the oversized, grimy coat, peeling away the first layer of deception. Beneath it, Theron Thorne was revealed, not in his usual corporate attire, but a well-fitted, if simple, dark suit, a sharp contrast to the rags he had just shed. As the final layers of the disguise came off, the matted wig that had obscured his silver hair, the prosthetic scars that had aged his face, the faint, lingering odor that had kept people at bay, the transformation was complete. The saggy, weary posture straightened, becoming ramrod straight. The vacant eyes sharpened into a laser-like focus, filled with an intelligent, piercing intensity. The man who stood before them was unequivocally Theron Thorne, the legendary founder and CEO, revealed in all his formidable glory. The auditorium erupted in a cacophony of gasps, whispers, and stunned murmurs, a wave of shock washing over the assembled crowd. Cashin and Lyra looked as if they had been struck by lightning, frozen in their seats. Their faces, seconds before filled with arrogant expectation, were now a grotesque mask of shock and dawning horror. Lyra's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and dawning comprehension, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place with sickening clarity. Cashin, usually so stoic, so unshakable, actually recoiled in his seat, a vein throbbing visibly on his temple, his carefully constructed world collapsing around him. The homeless man they had scorned, threatened, and openly mocked was their CEO. The implications crashed down upon them with the force of a tidal wave, drowning them in shame and dread. Theron ascended the steps to the stage, his movements now firm and purposeful, every inch the titan of industry, his presence commanding instant silence. He approached the podium, his gaze sweeping across the faces of his executives, lingering pointedly on Cashin and Lyra, whose expressions of abject terror were now impossible to mask, their carefully cultivated facades shattered beyond repair. The irony was exquisite, a silent triumph for the man who had dared to walk among them unseen. He cleared his throat, and the buzz in the auditorium instantly died down to an unnerving silence, every ear straining to hear his words. "Good morning, everyone," Theron's voice boomed, clear and resonant, echoing through the stunned hall. "I apologize for the slight delay, but it seems I was conducting some essential fieldwork." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in, allowing the full import of his statement to register in the minds of his now terrified executives. His gaze fixed firmly on Cashin and Lyra, he continued, his voice hardening with each word, becoming an instrument of judgment. "For the past few weeks, I have not been on a sabbatical, nor have I been ill. I have been Old Man Arthur. I have sat outside this building, unseen by most, dismissed by many. I watched. I listened. And what I witnessed was truly enlightening." He paused, letting his words hang in the air, thick with unspoken accusation, with the weight of every cruel word and dismissive gesture he had endured. Cashin and Lyra were now pale, their eyes darting wildly, desperately searching for an escape, a way to deny the undeniable, to rewrite the horrifying reality. They knew. They understood. Every cruel word, every dismissive gesture, every act of callous indifference they had shown the man they thought was a mere vagrant, now replayed in their minds with horrifying clarity, a torturous reel of their own moral bankruptcy. Theron's voice, though calm, now carried an undeniable edge of steel, a cold, unwavering resolve. "I saw who valued humanity. And I saw who valued only themselves." He looked directly at Cashin, his gaze unwavering. "Mr. Valerius, your threats, your disdain for anyone you deemed undesirable, your complete lack of empathy for those less fortunate than yourself, were illuminating. Your legal prowess is undeniable, Cashin. But your character, it seems, is deeply flawed, utterly devoid of the principles this company was built upon." He then turned his gaze to Lyra, his voice tinged with a profound disappointment. "And Miss Sterling, your preoccupation with optics, your casual cruelty, your willingness to sacrifice basic human decency for the sake of an image, It was truly a masterclass in corporate soullessness. You are brilliant at marketing, Lyra, but you have utterly failed the most fundamental test of humanity, the very core of what it means to lead. A profound, collective silence descended upon the auditorium. The air crackled with the weight of Theron's judgment, a palpable sense of doom. Cassian and Lyra were frozen, unable to speak, unable to move, their careers, their reputations, and their comfortable lives crumbling around them in real time. The masks had not just fallen, they had been brutally ripped away. And in their place, only naked shame and terror remained, a raw, exposed vulnerability that mirrored the very state they had so casually scorned. The climax had arrived, and the consequences would be swift and severe, a just and undeniable reckoning. The aftermath of Theron Thorne's shocking revelation was nothing short of a corporate earthquake, its tremors rippling through every level of Thorne Enterprises and far beyond its polished walls. The immediate fallout for Cassian Valerius and Lyra Sterling was swift and devastating, a meticulously executed dismantling of their careers and their carefully constructed lives, a public spectacle of their undoing. As Theron concluded his damning indictment from the stage, his voice echoing with an unwavering authority, a team of security personnel, led by Mr. Harrison, discreetly approached Cassian and Lyra. Before the two could even process the full weight of Theron's words, before they could conjure a single word of denial or apology, a pathetic plea for clemency, they were gently but firmly escorted out of the auditorium through a side door, their stunned silence broken only by the muffled sounds of the shocked audience. Their bewildered protests, their desperate pleas for a chance to explain themselves, to mitigate the damage, were met with unyielding silence from the security team, their faces impassive. They were led directly to their respective offices, now chillingly empty, where pre-prepared termination letters awaited them, along with simple cardboard boxes for their personal effects, a stark symbol of their sudden dispossession. The clauses in their contracts, specifically those pertaining to ethical conduct and bringing disrepute to the company, were invoked with cold precision, leaving no room for legal maneuvering. Their company cars, symbols of their executive status, were repossessed on the spot, their keys taken from their trembling hands. Their access badges, which had once opened every door within the empire, were deactivated with a quiet click. Their corporate credit cards were cancelled, severing their last financial ties to Thorne Enterprises. Within hours, their digital footprints within Thorne Enterprises were systematically erased, emails, shared documents, internal networks, all wiped clean, as if they had never existed. Their professional lives, which had been meticulously built brick by brick over years of relentless ambition, collapsed like a house of cards, leaving behind only dust and despair. The news spread like wildfire through the global corporate network, amplified by social media. The story of the CEO who went undercover as a homeless man and exposed his ruthless executives became a sensational headline, debated on financial news channels and social media platforms alike, a modern fable of corporate justice. Cassian and Lyra, once celebrated figures in their respective fields, admired for their sharp minds and their ability to navigate the complex corporate landscape, became pariahs, their names synonymous with callousness. Their professional reputations were irrevocably tarnished, their names whispered in hushed tones as a cautionary tale. Other major corporations, eager to avoid similar internal scandals, blacklisted them, shutting their doors to any potential employment. Job offers vanished into thin air. Networking contacts evaporated, refusing to associate with their tainted names. Their names became synonymous with corporate callousness, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms worldwide, a stark reminder of the consequences of inhumanity. Their personal wealth, largely tied to Thorne stock options and lavish salaries, diminished significantly as the news impacted the company's short-term stock performance, a minor blip for Thorne Enterprises, but a major catastrophe for their personal fortunes. The luxurious lifestyles they had grown accustomed to, the penthouses, the exotic vacations, the designer wardrobes, became unsustainable, their former opulence mocking them. They were left with nothing but the bitter taste of their own hubris and the crushing weight of public scorn, their punishment not just professional ruin, but a profound public humiliation that would follow them for the rest of their days, a brand of infamy impossible to erase. Meanwhile, in stark contrast, the life of Alara Finch was about to undergo a transformation as profound as it was unexpected, a quiet blossoming after a lifetime of unacknowledged toil. She had been sitting in the very back row of the auditorium, a quiet, almost invisible presence, content to observe the corporate theatrics from a distance. She had come simply out of curiosity, having heard the whispers about a major announcement, a rare break in her monotonous routine. When Theron Thorne revealed himself, peeling away the disguise of Old Man Arthur, Alara's breath caught in her throat. She had recognized the eyes, the subtle gestures, even through the elaborate disguise, a flicker of recognition that had made her wonder in the past. Her heart pounded with a mixture of disbelief and a quiet understanding, a profound sense of vindication for her silent acts of kindness. After the initial commotion subsided and the executives began to disperse, a quiet instruction was given. Alara was gently asked to remain. She waited nervously, her hands clasped tightly, wondering if she had inadvertently done something wrong, if her small acts of compassion had somehow been misconstrued. Then, Mr. Harrison approached her, a kind smile on his usually stoic face, a warmth in his eyes that was rarely seen. "Miss Finch," he began, his voice soft, respectful, "Mr. Thorne would like a word with you." Alara followed him to Theron's private office, a place she had only ever seen from the outside, a sanctum of power she, a mere cleaner, could never imagine entering. The sheer opulence of the room, the hushed reverence of its atmosphere, overwhelmed her senses. Theron was seated behind his massive desk, a silent testament to his empire, but his demeanor was warm, his gaze gentle, devoid of any hint of the imposing CEO. He motioned for her to sit in one of the plush leather chairs, a stark contrast to the hard, plastic seats she was accustomed to in the staff break room. "Alara," Theron began, his voice filled with genuine warmth, a profound gratitude radiating from him, "thank you for coming. I owe you a great deal." Alara's eyes widened, a tear starting to well up. "Mr. Thorne, I don't understand. She trailed off, words failing her. Theron smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached his eyes, a profound sense of peace settling over him. "You understood, Alara. You saw a man in need, and without a thought for yourself, without seeking recognition, you offered him kindness. You gave me food, warmth, and, more importantly, a glimmer of hope. You restored my faith in humanity, in the very soul of this company that I feared was lost." He paused, his gaze filled with profound gratitude, a silent acknowledgement of the immeasurable gift she had given him. "While others dismissed me, scorned me, threatened me, you saw a human being worthy of compassion. That, Alara, is a quality beyond measure. It is the very foundation upon which true leadership is built, the bedrock of any truly great enterprise." What followed was a moment Alara Finch would remember for the rest of her life, a turning point that shifted the very trajectory of her existence. Theron offered her not just a promotion, but a position that would allow her to use her innate compassion and quiet strength on a scale she could never have imagined. He established the Thorne Foundation for employee welfare and community outreach, a beacon of his renewed commitment to humanity within the corporate structure, and offered Alara the directorship, with a generous salary and the resources to genuinely make a difference in the lives of countless individuals. Her quiet acts of kindness had resonated so deeply with him, proving her to be the true embodiment of the company's original spirit. But the generosity did not stop there. Theron also revealed that he had acquired a comfortable, fully furnished house in a quiet, pleasant neighborhood, paid in full, no mortgage, no rent, and it was hers, a gift to provide her with the security and comfort she had long deserved. He also established a substantial trust fund in her name, enough to ensure her financial security for the rest of her life, and to allow her to care for her aging sister, a worry that had silently plagued Alara for years, a burden she had carried alone. Alara's eyes welled up with tears, brimming with overwhelming emotion. She tried to speak, to express the magnitude of her gratitude, but words failed her, caught in her throat. She simply nodded, tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of Theron's benevolence, the sudden, profound shift in her destiny. She had spent her entire life working hard, struggling quietly, never expecting anything more than modest sustenance, a simple existence. Now, in a single, humbling moment, her quiet acts of goodness had been recognized and rewarded beyond her wildest dreams, a testament to the unforeseen power of true compassion. The universe, it seemed, had a way of balancing the scales, of delivering justice and reward in equal measure, a silent testament to the enduring power of human kindness. Months later, Thorne Enterprises had not only recovered from the initial shockwave of the CEO's grand reveal but had emerged stronger, more aligned with the founding principles Theron Thorne had always envisioned. The company underwent a profound cultural shift, a top-to-bottom re-evaluation of its values. Theron, having secured his legacy and witnessed the true heart of his company, gradually stepped back from daily operations, appointing a new CEO, a young, brilliant visionary known for her ethical leadership and a keen sense of social responsibility, a leader who shared his renewed vision. He established mandatory empathy training programs for all executives, emphasizing community engagement and employee welfare as core values, not just buzzwords for annual reports. The public perception of Thorne Enterprises soared, transforming it from a mere corporate giant into a symbol of ethical capitalism and human-centered leadership, a true force for good in the world. Alara Finch, now the director of the Thorne Foundation, flourished in her new role, her quiet strength and deep empathy proving invaluable. She approached her work with the same quiet dedication and profound empathy she had shown Theron when he was Old Man Arthur, extending her compassion to countless others. She implemented initiatives for affordable housing for low-income employees, established a robust mental health support system, and launched community outreach programs that genuinely uplifted local neighborhoods, transforming lives with every act of thoughtful generosity. She moved into her new house, a place filled with light and warmth, a haven she had never dared to dream of, a tangible symbol of her quiet triumph. Her sister, now comfortably cared for, often visited, and the two women, both having faced a lifetime of hardship, found immense joy in their newfound security and peace, a shared contentment. Alara's story became an inspiring testament within the company, a constant reminder that true value lay not in titles or wealth, but in the quiet dignity of a kind heart, in the profound impact of a single compassionate act. Theron Thorne, in his retirement, found a deep sense of peace, a profound satisfaction in the legacy he had secured. He spent his days mentoring young entrepreneurs, investing in startups that prioritized ethical innovation, and simply enjoying the quiet moments of life, free from the relentless demands of the corporate world. He had faced his greatest fear, that his life's work would be corrupted by greed and indifference, and had triumphed, not through force, but through vulnerability and revelation. He had not only saved his company's soul but had also, through one profound act of disguised vulnerability, revealed the true nature of those around him, separating the wheat from the chaff. The saga of Theron Thorne, Old Man Arthur, and the fateful test became a legend whispered in corporate corridors, a modern parable for an age often blinded by ambition and superficial success. It served as a stark reminder that the true measure of an individual, and indeed, of any enterprise, lies not in the size of their balance sheet or the grandeur of their titles, but in the quiet choices they make when no one is watching, when the spotlight is off, and the masks are down. For it is truly in the darkness of adversity, when all pretense is stripped away, that one's true character shines brightest or, conversely, is exposed in its most chilling form. And as the world learned from the story of Thorne Enterprises, acts of pure, selfless goodness, no matter how small or unseen, are never truly forgotten, they are merely waiting for the moment to be recognized and, sometimes, profoundly rewarded. Kindness, it turns out, is the most valuable currency of all, a silent power that reshapes destinies. If this story of justice and unexpected rewards resonated with you, imagine the other incredible tales waiting to be discovered. Our channel is dedicated to bringing you more powerful narratives just like this one, where ordinary lives are touched by extraordinary events, and where hidden truths are dramatically revealed. Don't miss out on another thought-provoking story. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you're always the first to know when a new video drops. And now, we want to hear from you. What was the most shocking part of Theron Thorne's revelation? Have you ever witnessed a moment where someone's true character was revealed in an unexpected way? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below, we love reading them all.